What else are you going to come up with NAR? Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, it's a good word. And it's one of many words that we encounter here that in some cases, this is one of the only places that these words come up. Though, I mean, it's not the language in this book, Song of Songs, is not what makes it so unique. It's the uses of these words and how they're constructed that make it so unique. So, yeah, there's been a lot of discussion over the centuries over how this book made it into our Bible. They were discussing this 2,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, there's a discussion by the people who canonized the Bible, namely the rabbis, over whether this book should be in. And therefore, um, we know that there was discussion about it because that discussion doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It shows you that you know people in the biblical period who or again, we're not even sure when this book was written, but the people who wrote this book, whether or not they whether or not they intended it to be part of what we call the Bible is kind of irrelevant because at a certain point, the people who canonized the Bible, who kind of, edited and decided what was going to be in, felt that this book deserved to be there. Now, we think that might be to some extent because it's attributed to Solomon. And so if we have a book that's written by one of our kings, we should put it in because it's a piece of history, if you will. So this book is also called the Song of Solomon. Um, but I mean, the rabbis realized that there's nothing about God in this book. There's nothing about Jewish ritual in this book. There's nothing about our history in this book. So again, that begs the question: why would we put this in the Bible? Is it just because it's attached to Solomon? And of course, in the rabbinic period, there's this famous discussion in the Talmud where Rabbi Akiva, one of our most famous rabbis, basically says, if the Bible is holy, this is the holy of holies. Those are the words that he said. He said, if the Bible is kadosh, this is the kadosh kadoshim. Now, by his time, by Akiva's time, the temple had already been destroyed. But the fact that he would say that, the fact that he would say that this is the holy of holies, shows you that the rabbis had a way of understanding this that was different than it's just being songs of erotic poetry. So I, it's been a long time since we read this in a group setting. Um, I always point out when we get to a part of the Bible that we have in our liturgy and we come across it, I always point out what it is, right? So I'll definitely point that out today. What part of our liturgy you can find Song of Songs? Where else can you find it, right? Where will you see it? I'll definitely point that out. And um, what's really wild is that we're reading this when you're supposed to read this, because according to Jewish tradition, this is one of the Jewish orders of books. Um, this is read during the springtime, and we just celebrated Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Rosh Chodesh of Passover and of springtime, uh, 2 days ago. So this is exactly when you're supposed to read it. And there's a tradition to read it during the time of Passover, of Pesach. We read this Megillah, which is why it's the first of the Megillot. So let me actually just show you real quick. The Let me just show you the Megillot real quick. The organization of the Hebrew Bible to some extent, right? So so when we look at the last part, what we call again, this is the Ketuvim, the writings, the potpourri rather than miscellanea. This is lots of different things, right, that we're reading. So we read wisdom literature first. We read Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. That's not really all wisdom literature, because one of the definitely wisdom literature books is Ecclesiastes, but that's part of the Megillot, and you'll see. So we get to these first couple of books, which, by the way, are also attributed to kings, right? This is attributed to King David. Proverbs is attributed to Solomon. Job is not attributed to a king, but it's definitely a philosophical book. And then we get into what we call the five Megillot: Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. And the organization of these five Megillot, and we usually, of course, only talk about the last one because that's the one we usually traditionally still read off a scroll, off of a Megillah, which is what a Megillah means. But all of these are scrolls, and these are all read at the holidays. The organization of these books is by chronology. We read them, encounter them in the biblical year. Again, we usually today see our year starting at Rosh Hashanah, but in the Bible, in the biblical period, it started now. It started 2 days ago on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And so in the biblical period, when we read the Bible, the first holiday of the year is Passover. And Song of Songs would be read during this time, a time of springtime, a time of people kind of coming out of the darkness, of awakening. The poetry in Song of Songs is very similar to some of the other ancient Near Eastern writings from the Egyptians, from the Babylonians, from the Canaanites. We find similar songs, fertility songs. So the first is the spring, and we go into the end of spring. The next festival, right, harvest festival, is Shavuot. Then Lamentations is read during the summer at Tisha B'Av, on the darkest day of the year, the destruction of the first and second temples. Then we get to Ecclesiastes, which is traditionally read, also attributed to Solomon, is read during Sukkot, the next of the harvest festivals, the one that comes at the end of summer, beginning of fall. That is Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. And then the last scroll we read, we read it a month ago, at the end of the winter time, Esther. So that's the organization. Song of Songs to Esther goes in chronologically through the year, through our year, through our year after year. This is the yearly cycle of the Megillot. So then we come to the next part, the last part of the Bible, which is the part that we'll read probably, starting in a few months. We'll get to Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. These are, with the exception of Daniel, more historical books. But yeah, that's the organization. And as you can see, a good chunk of the last part of the Bible, the last third, a good chunk, not necessarily by length, because Psalms is much longer than all the Megillot put together, but a good chunk of it, if you looked at the books, right, a good chunk of it are the Megillot, right? So 5 of those books, right? So there's like 14 books or 13 books. Well, depends on when you break up Chronicles into 2. 5 of those books are the Megillot. So it's a good part of the last part of the Bible, of Ketuvim. So that's what we're going to be doing now, and for the next several weeks, months actually, we'll be reading the Megillot. So the last Megillah that we'll read will be Esther, which again we just kind of went through at Purim. Any questions? Any comments about that little overview again of our Bible? Again, we don't know when Song of Songs is written. The answers go all the way from the time of Solomon to 2nd or 3rd century, the Common Era. I'd say that's probably the most likely, but maybe not 3rd, maybe 4th, but somewhere around the same time that Ecclesiastes was written, and maybe even around the same time that maybe Proverbs was collected. Kind of late. Some people see a little bit of Aramaic influence, the language of Aramaic influencing the text. That's kind of like one of the linguistic giveaways of when this was written. But the setting of it definitely seems to be in the court of King Solomon, or the royal court, and that's the setting of it. But yeah, we'll jump into this now, and you will see why this is like no other book of the Bible. This is one of those books where you kind of say, well, the Bible covers 1,000 years of like literature, right? Of writings. There's writings in the Bible that go back to probably 1200 BCE to, again, ending in about 200, 150 BCE. So about 1,000 years of time and a whole lot of genres. And this is a genre. This is the erotic poetry of the Bible, and that's what it is. It is for you to see now. So, Rosemary, would you like to do a little of the Song of Songs for us?
The Song of Songs by Solomon. Oh, give me of the kisses of your mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Your ointments yield a sweet fragrance. Your name is like finest oil. Therefore do maidens love you. Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me to his chambers. Let us delight and rejoice in your love, savoring it more than wine. Like new wine, they love you. I am dark, but comely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the pavilions of Solomon. Don't stare at me because I am swarthy, because the sun has gazed upon me. My mother's sons quarreled with me. They made me guard the vineyards. My own vineyard I did not guard. Tell me, you whom I love so well, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you rest them at noon? Let me not be as one who strays beside the flocks of your fellows. If you do not know, O fairest of women, go follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your kids by the tents of the shepherds. I have likened you, my darling, to a mare in Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are comely with plaited wreaths, your neck with strings of jewels. We will add wreaths of gold to your spangles of silver. While the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved to me is a bag of myrrh lodged between my breasts. My beloved to me is a spray of henna blooms from the vineyards of En-Gedi. Ah, you are fair, my darling. Ah, you are fair with your dove-like eyes. And you, my beloved, are handsome, beautiful indeed. Our couch is in a bower. Cedars are the beams of our house, cypresses the rafters.
Yeah. Now, some people kind of look at where who's speaking in this, right?
Mm.
Are the people going back and forth, or there's differences of opinion? Because sometimes people say that it sounds like they're going back and forth, and then other people actually ascribe some of the words that sound like they're the man's actually to the woman. I think it has a lot to do with where people are with how forward they think the woman could have been at this time, right? And so some people have a real hard time seeing the woman being as aggressive as it's possible if she's the one who's saying some of the lines. So there's differences of opinion on 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 it. Now, some of the language is obvious because again, there is Hebrew will tell you whether it's a male or female when you're talking about who it is, right? It'll say he or she. The Hebrew or the Hebrew also has a male you and a female you. The problem is that a lot of the language is me, is I, and I is not a doesn't give us a gender, right? So I doesn't tell us who's speaking, right? It doesn't tell us what gender is speaking. It's also, again, very possible that the woman is somewhat more aggressive in here than the scholars or the maybe the rabbis or some of the more ancient scholars wanted it to be. Now, if we've read a chapter, you can see it's very sexual. Clearly, the imagery is already talking about, I mean, some of it's overtly sexual, and some of it seems to be implied or kind of poetic. Uh, but there's definitely sexual imagery in this. There's no question. Now, the rabbis, one of the ways that they interpreted this, and one of the ways they made sense of it, and still make sense of it, is that this is language between God and Israel, right? We are the bride in this. We are the woman, and God is the man, and the the um, sought after companion, because in this it definitely seems like the woman is looking for the guy. Well, we'll get to that a little bit more clearly, but yeah, we understood this as a metaphor, as a symbolic relationship between God and Israel. And of course, when the Christians came along, similar situation where Christ is the guy and the church is the woman. Well, so obviously, right away, you have to say, "Oh, well, that's interesting that we have imagery where the the men interpreting this see themselves in the relationship as the woman, right?" So, I mean, whatever you want to say about that, however you want to interpret that or understand that, that's what they're saying, right? They're saying that we are like a woman coming into God's chamber, right? Coming into his presence, coming into connection with him. So that's interesting. Obviously, that's something to be said. Again, we understood it that way. The church understood it in a similar way, and obviously they kept it. Interestingly, the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, don't consider this. They don't consider this holy literature. They don't consider this divinely inspired work. Yeah, I mean, probably because they thought it was too risque. They literally made the decision. Look, the Mormons essentially decided they recanonized the Bible, right? They said, well, that's in the Bible. The Bible is the Bible, but we're going to add some new books to it, right? And so once they did that, they kind of recanonized to some extent the Bible. And so they don't see the Song of Songs the same way that we do, the same way that most Christians do. And yes, Judith, you can say that out loud, but yes, the a controlled sexuality is definitely something that the Mormons have tried to maintain. So if you want to watch that, which I watched half of one episode of that horrible reality show of Mormon Wives or whatever it was called, yeah, people are fascinated by it because there's still an issue to this day about, how I wouldn't necessarily use the word repressed, but controlled sexuality within the LDS Church. But
how does this compare to writings from Greek?
Yeah, there's similarities.
I can't think of the word, fertility.
Yeah, it's closer. It's actually closer to the Canaanite fertility poems that we found. It's very similar to those. Uh, yeah, it's closer to the Near Eastern ones. There are some people who've pointed out to the similarities to the Greek ones, which is one of the reasons why some people say it's from such a late date. Like, if it's second or third century, then it could have been influenced by the Greeks. I don't think it necessarily has to, especially when we have ancient Near Eastern texts that are similar. So if there's people in our own backyard that are writing similar literature that we found, why does it doesn't have to be Greek? It's not like, look, I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's also, why would you not say it's more likely that they were influenced by their next door neighbors rather than they had to go to the Greeks? But
is it possible it was originally included, if you will, because we were trying to channel that energy of our people?
Look, it's a good, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, my guess is that this was attributed to Solomon as a poem, and people had kind of thought, well, it's written by Solomon, we can't throw it away. And so I think it got latched onto the tech to our texts, and um, and I think it, and I think once the rabbis were kind of stuck with explaining it, they look, in the scheme of things, this is definitely, we know this is an outlier. But I would argue that the book of Esther is more of an outlier than this. I mean, Esther is really far-fetched from the standpoint of, again, we know where that story comes from. It's completely a Persian court tale. And it's also much later. I mean, well, it's not just much later. We know, I mean, interestingly, yeah, I guess Esther could have been written even before this or around the same time. If Esther, we know for a fact that the people that are mentioned in the story of Esther didn't live until the 4th century, right? So that's 100% the case. So it's definitely late. This is supposed to be written by Solomon or during Solomon's time. Now, I don't know if it was actually written in Solomon's time, but I think people believed it was written in Solomon's time. And I think when people kind of sat with this, they said, well, if it's written by Solomon, it's got to be in the Bible. And then they had to kind of contextualize. Then they had to kind of make sense of it. But when we look at these poems, there's nothing in them, obviously, on the face of it that you'd say, well, we can learn something about Solomon from this. Look, we don't even know that Solomon is the guy mentioned in this. I think it's actually safe to say that it's not Solomon, that it's somebody in his court, it's somebody, one of his kids. It's we don't really know. I will tell you, look, part of what we just read in the first chapter is this really important idea that, at least from the standpoint of the dialogue, there is a woman talking in this, okay? There is a woman clearly as the character in this, and she's articulating feelings and she's speaking, right? That is already by itself an interesting thing that people, need to understand. That, was this written by a woman? Maybe, maybe not. Just because it's on a woman's voice doesn't mean it was written by a woman. But if these are, even if this is an imagined dialogue between a man and a woman, it is giving a woman's voice, or again, having a woman speak as a character in a way that, well, it's a woman's voice. I mean, look, you can make from that what you want, but I don't discount it just because a woman may not have written it, right? I think it's important that somebody actually, like, in a real way, kind of articulates a woman's sexuality in it. That, look, there's people who always kind of, like, made fun of, and it's been a long discussion. I think that the for people in a literary world would say, there was always this discussion over Flaubert's Madame Bovary, right? That he wrote this book from the standpoint of a woman, right? And so, his answer was, I am, that voice that's a voice, right? That's a legitimate voice. I am that voice, and a person could speak from that, with that voice. I can tell you that I like the fact that this is in the Bible, from the standpoint that somebody has to deal with, you have to deal with the fact that our Bible has texts in it that are human, and that are voices of humans in love, in all feelings. But this is clearly somebody who's in love, and also, I mean, not just love, but sexually aroused. So this is a voice. This is a voice of of humanity. This is a voice of a human being. Again, I won't argue over whether we'll never know for sure whether a woman really wrote this. We'll never know that. Did a woman really say this? Did somebody copy this down? I don't know. But it's interesting that it's kept in the Bible, you know? So I do want to point out there is a discussion about whether this is a black woman, right? This is an important kind of like, it's become an interesting discussion maybe for people. Because she says, I'm dark but comely, right? Don't stare at me because I'm swarthy. Now, the Bible wouldn't necessarily point out if the person was black. In biblical language, we really don't have descriptions of people's skin if they are black. So it wasn't an issue for the people in the Bible. But on the other hand, he does say that she's dark because she's out in the sun, which seems to imply I'm darker than I would be if I was not outside a lot. Now, it may not be that she's a laborer, by the way. It could be that it says that she guards the vineyards, but if her father owns the vineyards, right? If her father maintains, an estate, then, she's not a worker. But look, the whole setup for it is they made me guard the vineyards. My own vineyard, I did not guard. So this isn't about vineyards, right? This is not about keeping watch on the vineyard. Yeah, it is. It doesn't have to be, but the rabbis had to answer the question of how could this be here? Yeah, and they had to have an answer. The church had to have an answer too. So, well, listen, if we're going to ask the question of like how did this book get to us, at some point a group of guys sat around a room saying, saying this book we'll check this one off. And how did it get down through that? A lot of people over time had to kind of check it off. Now, again, whether it was always a group of people that checked it off, or maybe a scribe who said, you know what, we're keeping this scroll. This scroll we're keeping. So that was still an editorial decision, right? Somebody still made an editorial decision to do this. So again, for people in the African American community, this line has become an important line of recognition of African American women, or African women, but from a literary standpoint, this became, Toni Morrison wrote a book, almost 50 years ago now, by the way, called Song of Solomon, which, is kind of, if you think about it, I mean, it's a very well-known book, and it's a book that people, so maybe sometimes that's their first introduction to even knowing that there's a book called the Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. But it's an interesting phrase because again, it gets to the what do we find attractive? What do we find beautiful? And again, for certain people, this was considered to be like an affirmation that people with dark skin were beautiful too. So it also, of course, says Solomon. It mentions Solomon in particular, the pavilions of Solomon, the tents of Solomon. It also says the tents of Kedar, and it mentions Jerusalem. These places against and Pharaoh's chariots. All of these things seem to place it in the court En Gedi. We know about that oasis from King David. All of these places are places that we know of from King David and King Solomon time. Doesn't necessarily mean it was written during that time, but those are places that people and references that kind of put us into that time. We know that Solomon was married to one of Pharaoh's daughters. He was connected to them. It was maybe also one of the ways that he maintained chariots, which were very Egyptian things. Of course, it also mentions the cedars and cypresses. We know that, and it's also mentioned here is Lebanon. It's not, we haven't read it yet, but Lebanon is mentioned in this book, which again, Solomon got cedars of Lebanon for the temple, right? So all of these things, all these references kind of like point to this setting, whether or not it was not. Again, also, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but again, the voices going back and forth between male and female is an interesting question because people do have differences of opinion over who's speaking at certain points. At certain times, it's very obvious. At other times, you know, when somebody says when somebody says here, when the writer says, my beloved is to me a bag of myrrh lodged between my breasts, we assume that's a woman speaking there. I will tell you. So again, whether the voices are going back and forth in a section, there's differences of opinion on that. But let's read it. Let's continue on. This phrase we get a lot, and a lot of the references are to flowers, especially to flowers that are beautiful, look beautiful, and smell beautiful. This is one of them.
I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. Like a lily among thorns, so is my darling among the maidens. Like an apple tree among trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the youths. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my mouth. He brought me to the banquet room, and his banner of love was over me. Sustain me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. His left hand was under my head, his right arm embraced me. I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, by gazelles or by hinds of the field, do not wake or rouse love until it please. Hark, my beloved, there he comes, leaping over mountains, bounding over hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or like a young stag. There he stands behind our wall, gazing through the window, peering through the lattice. My beloved spoke thus to me, arise, my darling, my fair one, come away, for now the winter is past, the rains are over and gone, the blossoms have appeared in the land, the time of pruning is come, the song of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The green figs form on the fig tree, the vines in blossom give off fragrance. Arise, my darling, my fair one, come away. Oh, my dove, in the cranny of the rocks, hidden by the cliff, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is comely. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyard is in blossom. My beloved is mine and I am his, who browses among the lilies. When the day blows gently and the shadows flee, set out, my beloved, swift as a gazelle or a young stag, for the hills of spices.
Yep. Now again, you can see the just pop up some of these lines here. This line 16, is one of the most famous lines. It's been turned into many beautiful versions. One of them became very popular. Peter, Paul, and Mary even sang it, right? Dodi li, va'ani lo haroeh bashoshanim. That's one melody that you may have heard of. There's a very famous version of Dodi li, which we oftentimes sing at Jewish weddings, right? It's often played at Jewish weddings.
Why don't you play some for us?
What?
Why don't you play some for us?
I'm going to. It's good that you say that, right? So this is the Dodie Lee that I don't know when it first came out, but it became very, very popular. Let me just share it up here. Listen to John's singing Wicked right now. I just wanted to tell you. John Stolman just sang Wicked. He just sang popular. He sang one word, but he did sing it. Okay. He did. All right, I'm going to put a little Dodie Lee in here. This is the way Peter, Paul, and Mary sang it. But that was written by, that melody was composed by Stephen Scher Cantor, who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. Isn't that pretty? It's a pretty melody, right?
There's also one from years and years and years ago, probably the 60s, that we used to dance to.
Yeah. Dodie Lee Vani Lo Aroe Bashoshanim. That one, right? Dodie Lee Vani Lo Aroe Bashoshanim. I can't find that one right now. No, 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 no. Yeah. It's a beautiful melody. I'm not gonna yeah, it's a beautiful line. It's amazing how it became part of our cultural legacy too, because when words like that make their way into our culture, it reminds you how, again, a part of the Bible that people maybe felt uncomfortable with, help us find other ways to, in this case, of course, express our love. So yeah, it's pretty moving. It's a pretty moving song. And again, it's very similar to a line that we're about to read, which is the most famous line of Song of Songs. I mean, it's one of the most famous lines in the Bible, but it reminds us of this, is right? Anila dodi va dodi li, right? Dodi li va anilo, which is my beloved is mine and I am his, which in Anila dodi va dodi li, you're going to see is very similar. We could see the same words, dodi li va ani. It's a little different. But yeah, they're both in here. But this one, of course, also has the flowers, right? The Shoshanim. So, yeah, it's again one of the more famous lines of this. Again, it's the woman speaking in many cases. In this case, it was definitely the woman speaking here. And what's also interesting, of course, is the woman is not just speaking to her beloved at some point. She's actually speaking to the maidens of Jerusalem, Benot Yerushalayim, which is interesting because she's also kind of like almost telling women about how you need to approach love. So as much as she's speaking to a guy, right, her beloved, she's also speaking in a way as kind of a not just so much a caution, but like a guidance for women, which here is an interesting caution, which is don't stir up that passion unless there's something you can do about it to some extent, right? So don't get it going until it's the right time. It's a very interesting line, but it, I mean, she could be speaking in her mind to other women, but it's what it says. So, and of course, she's speaking sometimes in the words of her beloved, right? My beloved spoke thus to me. So she's quoting the person in her stuff here. All right, pretty cool. See that voice and those voices, and again, in some cases, these really, really famous lines. Animals are also mentioned here too, right? They're also brought into the poetry. In this case, the deer, the gazelle. It's only 8 chapters. It's a long song. It's a long song. Well, no, you have to. Oh, geez. Did you hear what John just said? I'm not going to repeat it. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to actually, no, I will repeat it. He says, yeah, there's other men on. There's mics on. There's other people on who are male. But yes, John just said that this was long and drawn out because it was written by a woman. Oh, no. There's long songs written by guys too, by the way. I'll just tell you, sometimes guys write songs that are too long. And by the way, I'm not going to say anything more. So, yeah, let's get back to the Song of Songs and this poetry. So here's chapter 3.
Upon my couch at night, I sought the one I love. I sought, but found him not. I must rise and roam the town, through the streets and through the squares. I must seek the one I love. I sought, but found him not. I met the watchman who patrolled the town. Have you seen the one I love? Scarcely had I passed them when I found the one I love. I held him fast. I would not let him go till I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of her who conceived me. I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, by gazelles or by hinds of the field, do not wake or rouse love until it please.
There's that line again, right? Now she was looking for the guy, couldn't find him. She got nervous. Where is he? Turns out he's okay. He's not anywhere he shouldn't be. But then what does she do? I mean, this is pretty clear that the woman did this, is doing this. She brings him into her house, to her mom's bed. That's what she just said. Yeah, she brought him in. There you go.
Who is she that comes up from the desert like columns of smoke, in clouds of myrrh and frankincense, of all the powders of the merchant? There is Solomon's couch, encircled by 60 warriors of the warriors of Israel, all of them trained in warfare, skilled in battle, each with sword on thigh because of terror by night. King Solomon made him a palanquin of wood from Lebanon. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple wool. Within, it was decked with love by the maidens of Jerusalem. O maidens of Zion, go forth and gaze upon King Solomon, wearing the crown that his mother gave him on his wedding day, on his day of bliss.
Yep. Now, what does this have to do with King Solomon, right? So people say, well, King Solomon's in the story, but is he in the story as an imagination, right? As a kind of like conjuring up an image. The writer is conjuring up an image of a strong, virile King Solomon to kind of compare him to the man that she loves, right? Yeah. So this is, again, it's attached to Solomon. Could it be about Solomon? Yeah, it could be. But there definitely seems to be the idea that King Solomon would have written this seems strange because Why would he write about him? Well, he could write about himself in the third person, but it really seems like a woman who's still at this point talking, right? At this point, it still seems like a woman is talking. I mean, to me, you can argue that some of the lines seem like maybe it went back and forth. That's what some people say. But it's also possible so far that up to this point, there's a woman talking. Let's go. Continue.
Oh, you are fair, my darling. Oh, you are fair. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes climbing up from the washing pool. All of their twins, and not one loses her young. Your lips are like a crimson thread. Your mouth is lovely. Your brow behind your veil gleams like a pomegranate split open. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built to hold weapons, hung with 1,000 shields, all the quivers of warriors. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, browsing among the lilies. When the day blows gently and the shadows flee, I will betake me to the mount of myrrh, to the hill of frankincense. Every part of you is fair, my darling. There is no blemish in you. From Lebanon, come with me. From Lebanon, my bride, with me. Trip down from Amana's peak, from the peak of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the hills of leopards. You have captured my heart, my own, my bride. You have captured my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one coil of your necklace. How sweet is your love, my own, my bride. How much more delightful your love than wine, your ointments more fragrant than any spice. Sweetness drops from your lips, O bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the scent of your robes is like the scent of Lebanon. A garden locked is my own, my bride, a fountain locked, a sealed up spring. Your limbs are an orchard of pomegranates and of all luscious fruits, of henna and of nard. Nard and saffron, fragrant reed and cinnamon, with all aromatic woods, myrrh and aloes, all the choice perfumes. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, a rill of Lebanon. Awake, O north wind, come, O south wind, blow upon my garden that its perfume may spread. Let my beloved come to his garden and enjoy its luscious fruits.
Read the next line.
I have come to my garden, my own, my bride. I have plucked my myrrh and spice, eaten my honey and honeycomb, drunk my wine and my milk.
Yeah. So the last part from 4:1 to 5:1, we ascribe that to be written now for sure by the guy, right? So, I mean, some of it obviously is pretty clear that it's written by a guy because he's talking about his bride, right? He says, "From your lips, oh my bride, my kala," right? Uh, and so we see, you know, that he's talking about her. Interestingly, by the way, he calls her neck like the Tower of David. Even though he's talking about a woman, he is clearly here talking about a woman, and he says your neck is like the Tower of David, which you think like, well, that's a line that a guy's gonna, it's gonna be describing the guy, but it's not. Um, talking about her breasts like two fawns, right? These are lines that are also famous because they're very poetic and they're, you know, whenever we see the browsing among the lilies, those kind of people, put all those browsing through the lilies together. But you can see the description of Lebanon, Senir and Hermon. These are all places up in the northern part, mountainous, beautiful. People would look at those places and think about some of the more beautiful landscape of the country.
I missed,
And
what was the name they used for Lily?
Shoshanim.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
Shoshana, right? There you
Yeah,
go.
that's my daughter. Yeah.
That's your daughter's name, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Shoshana is the word we use for lilies. Roim, is when that's the phrase that you that we have a lot. The browsing among the lilies, right? Haroim bashoshanim, the roeh bashoshanim, or haroim, browsing among the lilies. That's the phrase that we get a lot too.
So
But
why do
again,
they call it rose sometimes?
so that's a good question. So we have
Yeah.
another word. A lot of this has to do with the translations. Again, how people, would translate flowers, or what they would say, right? So um, in Song of Songs, we assume that they're talking about lilies, the Shoshana. Um, Here again, well, even here they're saying it's maybe not, should not be a rose, but a crocus. They're talking about flowers that were common in the land of Israel at that time. And lilies were definitely there. The chabatzelat, which is more like the crocus or the anemone, um, the 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 flowers, the red wild flowers that grow in Israel. The rose wasn't a big flower in the early biblical period. It wasn't a flower that was part of Israel's consciousness. It just wasn't there. So rose cultivation, I will tell you, was not in the ancient Near East. Let me see. Um, let's see. Um, Let me see.
I think medieval times is when they really took off with the rose.
Yeah, I mean that's when they start. That's when we start. That's when you start to see translations of Shoshana as a rose, right? Um, but the the lily was a really important flower for ancient Israel, and it's it the lily was actually used. I'm going to show you a picture real quick. Was the symbol of King David. So you know the the it's considered to be. I'll show you a picture. Um, it's considered to be the symbol. It was the royal symbol, and let me just show you a picture of it. It's one of the reasons why it was used as a symbol for the dynasty.
Does the name David mean beloved?
Beloved, yeah.
So
But
beloved with the lily, yeah.
yeah, I'm going to show it to you. And by the way, you're going to figure something out when I show this to you. This is the oldest Jewish coin that we have.
Oh my.
So these are the coins of the Jews during it says Yehud. This was during well, not that one, this one. Yes, I'll show you in 1 second. So this is the oldest Jewish coin. It says Yehud, it says Judea or Judah, during the Persian period. That's the oldest coin. When the shekel came along in the modern era, guess what? We went back to that, the lily. So this is still a shekel. This is the shekel, the new shekel, the shekel hadash. It says shekel hadash on it, right? This is the new coin of Israel, which is essentially like, it's worth like a quarter, 30 cents, whatever. And that's the oldest. So this is the oldest Jewish coin, and then we brought the coin back, right? Now, if you know a little bit about regal history, it probably was in some movie or something once. Anyways, who else uses the lily as a symbol of their royal
This
family?
looks like France.
Kings of France.
Yeah,
Yes,
France. Fleur de
the
lis.
French, which is why one of the reasons that people, tried to connect the French dynasty, the Merovingian dynasties to fleur de lis, right, to the to King David. So, um,
And
you
isn't the
know,
lily also one of the symbols of Jesus too? Yeah.
it is, and so it's connected to Mary. But the whole question of why is it connected to Mary is it connected to Mary because it was King David, right? So it was Davidic, a sign of the Davidic dynasty. So it's definitely a connection um, to King David. And in the Song of Songs, it seems to be again more of symbolic, or not symbolic, but part of part of the beauty of, right. So we have spices, we have flowers, we have animals, right? We have geographic locations. All of these things are ways, and then we of course have a little bit of food, right? Honey and milk. Um, so we have these different images, and the lily is the one that was used. But yes, you're right. Oftentimes, people kind of associate the Shoshanim with roses, but that's not what it was. It was a lily. Um, so yeah, so that was a guy speaking. So if the first couple of chapters there's a little bit of back and forth, that chapter seems to be the guy speaking the whole time, from 4:1 to 5:1. Now we go back to the woman speaking. So it's kind of weird that they broke it like this. Again, this was not done by us, but definitely seems the guy is speaking here. He says, "My own, my bride," right? He says, "Achuti kala," which of course, Achuti also means my sister. We understand it's not my sister. He's not speaking to a sister, though there were people who said that this was written by Solomon's son. He could be talking to one of his half sisters. That's for people who read this very literally, right? Very literally. But it did not have to be. It does not have to be. But yes, Achuti, if you read in some translations, will say my sister. I don't know if the King James says that. I
Yeah, it
don't know.
does.
Does it?
Yeah.
Mike and Mary? Mary, you've got the thing in front of you. It says sister.
It says sister.
Yeah. So that's a literal translation. But when you look at the context, it seems like, again, when you see the next word says kala. Now, when we hear the word kala in Hebrew, when we talk about the bride, we think about one thing a lot in our prayers, right? We have a prayer that talks about the kala a lot, right? Who is that? What's that song? Where's that prayer? Hello? What's the name of the prayer?
Yes.
Come, my beloved.
Yes.
Yes, Lachadodi. So Lachadodi actually lifts a lot of the words directly from the Song of Songs. We'll show you in a little bit, but yeah, these are quotes from that. So when we see the word "my bride," people is going back and forth. I'll point out some of the actual lifting from Song of Songs. So, look, the Kabbalists definitely looked at this as symbolic. They looked at this as allegorical, and they liked the lines, and they put them, they put them by way of the Zohar and the Kabbalistic texts. They popped their way into Song of Songs. I'll point out to you when we finish, because not all of them are obvious, but some of them you'll see. I'll point out a couple of the more obvious ones. And we don't do all the lines of Chadodi, right? There's actually 9 lines, so we don't do all. We do 3. Okay, let's go back to the Song of Songs, chapter 5.
Eat, lovers, and drink deep of love. I was asleep, but my heart was wakeful. Hark, my beloved knocks. Let me in, my own, my darling, my faultless dove, for my head is drenched with dew, my locks with the damp of night. I had taken off my robe. Was I to don it again? I had bathed my feet. Was I to soil them again? My beloved took his hand off a latch, and my heart was stirred for him. I rose to let in my beloved. My hands dripped in myrrh, my fingers flowing myrrh upon the handles of the boat. I opened the door for my beloved, but my beloved had turned and gone. I was faint because of what he said. I sought, but found him not. I called, but he did not answer. I met the watchmen who patrolled the town. They struck me. They bruised me. The guards of the wall stripped me of my mantle. I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, if you meet my beloved, tell him this, that I am faint with love. How is your beloved better than another, O fairest of women? How is your beloved better than another, that you adjure us so? My beloved is clear-skinned and ruddy, preeminent among 10,000. His head is finest gold. His locks are curled and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by watercourses, bathed in milk, set by a brimming pool. His cheeks are like beds of spices, banks of perfume. His lips are like lilies, they drip flowing myrrh. His hands are rods of gold studded with beryl. His belly a tablet of ivory adorned with sapphires. His legs are like marble pillars set in sockets of fine gold. He is majestic as Lebanon, stately as the cedars. His mouth is delicious, and all of him is delightful. Such is my beloved, such is my darling, O maidens of Jerusalem.
We're going to keep going a little bit more because she's still talking.
Whither has your beloved gone, O fairest of women? Whither has your beloved turned? Let us seek him with you. My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to browse in the gardens, and to pick lilies. I am of my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He browses among the lilies. You are beautiful, my darling, as Tirzah, comely as Jerusalem, awesome as bannered hosts.
Yeah, and we're going to pause there because this does seem like the woman this whole time talking until the next line, which again, in the next line seems to go back to the man. So, um, yeah, again, she seems to go a little nuts when he's not there, right? Um, she again is talking to the maidens of Jerusalem, Benot Yerushalayim. You know, she's talking to women, to the public again, or not the public, the chorus again, if you will, the people there, or the people in her mind, the lessons that she's teaching to people. And again, this all seems to be her describing the guy that she loves. Now it says that he's clear-skinned and ruddy, a dome. The fact that he's reddish has led people to believe that, again, this is part of, you know, he's one of, if not, this is not Solomon. If it's not Solomon, then it's one of the part of the dynasty, because King David is described as ruddy. It's one of the only things we know about King David is that he has, in one description of him, he has a ruddy complexion. He's Adom. He's redder than most. Maybe freckles. Maybe he has reddish hair, reddish blonde hair. This is the description of this person that she's talking about. Again, she seems to say that she's a little bit on the darker side, while he's a little bit more ruddy. Again, it's poetic. It's meant to be, you know, maybe not taken literally, but these are the descriptions of his physical body. She's definitely talking about him. And then when, if assuming that she's still talking about the guy, that's where she says, my beloved has gone to the garden, Dodi, my beloved has gone there. Again, my beloved doesn't say for sure. It says my beloved. But again, the next word tells us he's gone, right? Yarad. Then the next line is Ani Dodi v'Dodi li, and Ha ro'eh b'shoshanim. So he browses among the lilies is definitely part of this. So the Anila Dodi Vidodi Li means just I, my beloved, and my beloved is mine. That part can be said by a man to a woman or a woman to a man. No issue. It's I. The last part of it is definitely a man that she's speaking to. Ha ro'eh means he is the browser among the lilies. So this means that one of the most popular lines in well, definitely the most popular line in this book, and one of the most popular lines in the entire Bible, is written by or is voiced by a woman. I, my beloved, and my beloved is mine. Those words are on many ketubas. They're on many people put them on their ring. If they want Hebrew on their wedding ring, they'll put those words either inside or on the outside of the ring. And one of the more, again, one of the spiritual, non-personal ways of understanding this is if you take the letters Ani, Ladodi, Vidodi, Li, it spells Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, spells the word Elul, which is the last month of the Jewish year, the month before Rosh Hashanah, and where the rabbis interpret it as this is Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li. We reapproach, we become closer again to God after the time of Tisha B'Av, the destruction, which is our low point with God, that we come back, that the reapproachment and the love comes to climax at Rosh Hashanah. Now, for people who looked at this as a mystical and kind of like more, I don't know if you will, kind of like a more Gnostic belief that this was literally the time when the marriage between God and man takes place again at Rosh Hashanah. But those words, Anila Dodi Vidodi Li, become the powerful lines of marriage and of kind of, if you will, the words that in some cases, when people didn't want to say the traditional Hebrew vows to each other at a wedding of Harayat Mekudeshet Li, I take you to be my wife according to the laws of Moses and Israel, that they would say the words Anila Dodi Li back and forth to each other. So that was the kind of the new words that people would say to each other at a wedding. Sometimes we still do that. We still either do that or we have add those to the traditional words. Here, I'm going to show you one of my favorite Hebrew tattoos. There's a dude who has it right on his arm. There it is. Anila Dodi Vidodi Li Haro Eba Shoshanim. Does anybody know whose arm that is? I'll give you a clue. He's wearing a soccer uniform.
Beckham.
New. That's Beckham. That is David Beckham's arm. So David Beckham, whose grandfather was Jewish, wanted to have something on his arm. I don't know if that was before or after he cheated on her, but that was a big deal. And just so you know, his wife reciprocated with the tattoo. That's Victoria Beckham's back. That's her spine. She has Anila Dodi Vidodi Li Haro Eba Shoshanim on her back. Interesting, right? There you go. Something you didn't know you'd learn today. Yeah, so the words are important to people. They become they become words that people treasure because they so beautifully and literally in 4 words in Hebrew kind of summarize the reciprocity that you sometimes, again, if you want to talk about it's the basic building block of love, is that reciprocity that I am to, and again, obviously there's differences between two people who love each other, but at the end of the day, there's that equal sign, right? I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. And then the two people are on the opposite sides of it. What's so beautiful about it is technically, of course, that anybody can say this to somebody that they love, regardless of gender, by the way. I just want to point that out, that this is a genderless phrase because it's I, my, not he or she. But again, this is the if you will, the basic building block. It goes beyond sexuality. It is the basis for that kind of understanding that the person that we love, also loves us back, right? It's kind of obvious, but it's the basic. It's the bottom line. That's where it's at. So Floyd asked an interesting question. Is there significance to the fact that this comes right after Job? The way that it was put, the way that it was, put there as the first of the Megillot is the reason why it's the book that we read next. But the fact that this is juxtaposed, again, the fact that we read Job and then immediately go into this is really amazing. It wasn't intended to be like that. And because as Jews, we've never really kind of read like the way we're reading the Bible now, by book after book after book, is not the way the Jewish people normally read the Bible. So this was not done that often, in the sense that the scrolls were read when they were read, right? They were read at the time of year that they were read. And so picking the Bible, kind of picking the parts out of it that you read when you wanted to read it, were the way that was read, right? Very few during the thousands of years of Jewish history, very few people sat down and read the book of Samuel the way we read it. They read Samuel, or we've read Samuel, and again, there are a lot of Jews who don't know all of Samuel because they only read the Haftarot. The only parts of Samuel they know are the parts that are read on Shabbos as part of the Haftarot, which were very important parts, have to do with, Samuel choosing Saul as king, David running away from Saul, very powerful scenes, but they weren't the whole book. Same thing with Judges. I mean, people knew the story of Jephthah, they knew the story of Samson, but most of Judges they didn't know because it wasn't part of the Haftarah. So, we very rarely read the Bible the way, as Jews, the way we've been reading it. So people didn't necessarily see it like that, and so the organization, the placement of it wasn't on the forefront of Jewish consciousness. The only part of the Bible that we read like chapter after chapter after chapter is the Torah. That's the only book that people read through from cover to cover, where they read it. What came before was important.
Rabbi?
Well, wait, and by the way, I just want to say another thing. And that's why Psalms, very rarely do people say, well, that psalm is Psalm 22, and then the next psalm is 23. Very rarely do the rabbis use the juxtaposition of the psalms in the order as important, because they didn't really see the psalms necessarily as like, well, that's Psalm 22, and then that's Psalm 23, or that's Psalm 121, and that was Psalm 118. It's in the same section. So they very rarely saw, the placement of the book as significant. But like we do, I mean, now we do. Yeah, Floyd.
Well, I was just, the reason I asked the question is because I see Job as an investigation of man's relationship to God, ending with this inequity, this
Yeah.
unfortunate non-answer to the question. But here we are in Song of Psalms, and it seems like now we're talking about the proper relationship of man and woman as opposed to man and God, and there's an equity to this. I am my beloved is mine. We keep seeing that throughout this book, and it seems to me that again we're looking at it as the proper relationship. If Job is idealized as some kind of superhuman, maybe these people are too, but they're models to follow. At least I see it that way.
No, it's a great point. And I would say it's a really, really important point. I would say for us, the way we're reading it, that's a great way to look at it. Interestingly, um, I'm just going to look to see if because the rabbi saw Song of Songs as a relationship between God and man, the connection between having this inequity that we have in Job and then this parity or this connection, this, I wouldn't say equity, but this deep intimacy that we have is very interesting because I don't see anything that was written about from our standpoint. But from because we wouldn't have necessarily, like I said, it's not like a Jew opened up the Bible and then this was the next chapter. But it is for us, and definitely the way that we're reading it. And you could say, by the way we've organized the Bible, because Christians, again, have organized the Bible differently than we have, that when we read the Bible, that if we think about what we just read and the fact that you go through these extremes, I think it's an excellent point, that actually you're seeing, if you're going to look at it from the traditional viewpoint, this is an amazing thing because what we end up having is a relationship between we have a relationship of kind of like feeling disconnected from God or not even being able to understand God, to now look how close we are to God. If that's, again, even though like I said, we didn't necessarily read it like this, to read the both of them, to go from one to the next as we have, becomes even more dramatic that our ancestors who saw this as an allegory would say, that's part of the Bible, this intimacy that we have with God, and then this, you can't understand me. It is amazing that both of those exist as ways of looking at God, that we have those traditionally in our tradition. I'll just show you the way the Catholic Church canonized the Bible. This is the order of the books. Well, again, they put the poetic books together. So they call them the poetic books. So they have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then Song of Songs. And then they have the book that they call the Wisdom of Solomon, which is interesting because the Wisdom of Solomon is not in our Bible. And so what they really do here, I'll just show you this real quick. What they have is the books kind of, they have the books organized by genre, right? They have a genre organization. And so the poetic books, which is weird because, these are not necessarily all, I mean, the fact that they're poetry, I mean, Proverbs is not poetry. It's sayings, right? It's interesting that they had that. And again, these two books, Wisdom of Solomon and Sirach, are part of the Apocrypha. They're written by Jews, but they're not in our Bible. And then they put the prophetic books at the end because they want that to lead up to the Christian Bible. Because again, when you get to Malachi, that prophet that we read at the very end Malachi is one of our last prophets. They knew that these were our last prophets. that, you know, Malachi kind of leads up to this idea that there will be a day of judgment, the day that we say, you know, Elijah is going to come. It's what we read actually next week, the Haftarah for before Passover, that, you know, Elijah is going to announce this great trembling day, which they understand to be.
What is the book of Sirach about?
That's interestingly mentioned in the Talmud. So this book, The Wisdom of Sirach, and what it really is, and we know that it's a later book, right? So we know that it's written during the Greek period. Is, you know, it's considered to be wisdom literature. It's considered to be, again, you know, they say it's closely resembles Proverbs. It's true, and also has, you know, certain levels of you know, similarities to Ecclesiastes. It says, this is what we said, despite containing the oldest list of Jewish canonical texts, the book of Sirach itself is not part of the Jewish canon. Some authors suggest this is due to its late authorship, although the canon was not yet closed at the time of Ben Sirach. For example, the book of Daniel was included, even though it seems to be later, right? Others have suggested Ben Sirach's self-identification as the author precluded it from attaining canonical status, because it says he wrote this. Or it was denied entry to the canon as rabbinic counter to its embraced by Jewish Christians. Maybe, but again, it is very similar to other parts of the Bible. Maybe it was considered to be a little redundant, but again, that didn't necessarily always keep things out of the Bible if they're redundant. But again, it's interesting that it's not preserved, was not preserved by us as a canonical text, but we did find copies of it at the Cairo Geniza, which is where we kept, you know, books that we ended up realizing a lot of the stuff about what was important during the Middle Ages and up through the Middle Ages from going through the Cairo Geniza. Interesting story about the Geniza, if you want to read more about it. But we also found fragments of Ben Sirach at the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we also found some even at Masada. So we know that it was important, and it was important to us. It was just not canonized, but it probably was because of its last date, you know, later dates. So it's not in our Bible. It's also not, of course, because of that, it's not in the Protestant Bible either. So it's also quoted and mentioned in the Talmud. I don't see where they talk about it here, but maybe I just didn't come across it. Yeah, here it is. The work of Ben Sirach is also quoted occasionally by the Talmud, right? It's in Sanhedrin, Chagiga, Baba Batra, and Nida. These are all tractates where they mention it. They don't mention it by name, but they quote it. So, and again, there's even a discussion in the Talmud of whether we can read it. And that's because probably by that point, Christians were reading it. And then there's a question of whether this book was a Christian book or whether it was a Jewish book. So there are discussions about that in the Talmud. But it was also probably, again, because we realized it was a late date, and it's written by a guy. It says right off the bat who wrote it. Again, says King David wrote some of the Psalms. It doesn't make it not good, but King David also lived 1,000 years before those people who were deciding it. All right, so let's read now back to the guy. The guy is going to be talking here in 6:5, according to what we think.
Turn your eyes away from me, for they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes climbing up from the washing pool. All of them bear twins, and not one loses her young. Your brow behind your veil gleams like a pomegranate split open. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and damsels without number. Only one is my dove, my perfect one, the only one of her mother, the delight of her who bore her. Maidens see and acclaim her, queens and concubines, and praise her. Who is she that shines through like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, radiant as the sun, awesome as bannered hosts. I went down to the nut grove to see the budding of the vale, to see if the vines had blossomed, if the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I knew it, my desires set me mid the chariots of Aminadab.
Now, according to, again, some people, this is the end of the guy talking about her. A lot of people would say, some people would say, it's it's not very romantic to start comparing your wife or this woman to other women. But it's what I guess you're going to do what you're going to do. This is a guy who's married to a lot of other women, comparing her to all the other women and going, yeah, but she's the best woman. I don't know. Might take away a little bit of may not be the way you and I would do things nowadays, but then again, you and I might not be married to 100 women. Maybe it was considered really romantic to say, you're better than all those other women that come into my palace. Or again, it's just a poetic way of saying you're really, really, really special to me. So none of the other women really matter to me other than you. This next part is considered descriptions of a woman, maybe by a guy or maybe by other people that are like the chorus, if you will, speaking, not the guy's not speaking anymore, but maybe other people are now describing this woman's beauty. So let's look.
Turn back, O maid of Shulam. Turn back, that we may gaze upon you. Why will you gaze at the Shulamite in the Mahanaim dance? How lovely are your feet in sandals, O daughter of nobles. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master's hand. Your navel is like a round goblet, let mixed wine not be lacking. Your belly like a heap of wheat, hedged about with lilies. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is a tower of ivory, your eyes like pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Bat Ramimi. Your nose like the Lebanon tower that faces towards Damascus. The head upon you is like crimson wool. The locks of your head are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. How fair you are, how beautiful. Oh, love with all its rapture. Your stately form is like the palm. Your breasts are like clusters. I say, let me climb the palm. Let me take hold of its branches. Let your breasts be like clusters of grapes, your breath like the fragrance of apples, and your mouth like choicest wine. Let it flow to my beloved as new wine gliding over the lips of sleepers. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me.
So right now, that was a description of the woman, right? A description, which again, some people say is still going on. But look at this next line.
Come, my beloved, let us go into the open. Let us lodge among the henna shrubs.
That's the line. L'chadodi. Come, my beloved. That's the song. L'chadodi. That's the title of the song. Come, my beloved. Again, we have the word Dodi many times in this, right? Beloved, and as Gail pointed out, Dodi is the root for David. It's a play on, the name that we know. But again, the descriptions here, very, very erotic, very beautiful, very graphic, all of those things. And so again, when we talk about like how many lines does it take to describe somebody, some of the best lines are here in chapter 7, right? Some of the most powerful lines, some of the most famous lines are still hitting. So you can't do it in too short a time because you've got to let all this hit. And so some of it's gonna hit powerfully, and some of it's not gonna but you gotta, you gotta have some stuff there, right? You gotta have some stuff. So these are some of these descriptions are pretty, pretty bold.
Let us go early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has flowered, if its blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give my love to you. The mandrakes yield their fragrance. At our doors are all choice fruits, both freshly picked and long stored have I kept, my beloved, for you.
Mm.
If only it could be as with a brother, as if you had nursed at my brother's breast. Then I could kiss you when I met you in the street, and no one would despise me.
That's interesting, right? That's an interesting line because there seems to be this issue of being out in public together. So where does that come from? You know? So if you were my brother, that's why, again, it doesn't seem like these people are brother and sister, because if they were brothers and sisters, then they could be in public together. These people cannot be in public together, or at least this line doesn't seem to imply that they're even in public together yet at this point. We're almost done, but I'll comment on that in a second.
Well, it also could be that that you're allowed to kiss your brother in public, but not your lover.
No, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not that they're keeping their affair a secret, but just that propriety is different.
Yes. If they were, yes, exactly. If they were siblings, then they could hug and kiss in front of other people and it wouldn't be an issue, right? Exactly. Yep.
I would lead you, I would bring you to the house of my mother, of her who taught me. I would let you drink of the spiced wine of my pomegranate juice. His left hand was under my head, his right hand caressed me. I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, do not wake or rouse love until it please.
There's the line again, right? There's the line again. Don't get this going until the right time, which again seems to be like part of the problem. They have all this passion, all this desire for each other, and they really can't do anything about it.
Who is she that comes up from the desert, leaning upon her beloved? Under the apple tree I roused you. It was there your mother conceived you. There she who bore you conceived you. Let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand. For love is fierce as death. Passion is mighty as Sheol. Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. Vast floods cannot quench love, nor rivers drown it. If a man offered all his wealth for love, he would be laughed to scorn. We have a little sister whose breasts are not yet formed. What shall we do for our sister when she is spoken for? If she be a wall, we will build upon it a silver battlement. If she be a door, we will panel it in cedar. I am a wall. My breasts are like towers. So I became in his eyes as one who finds favor. Solomon had a vineyard in Baal Hamon. He had to post guards in the vineyard. A man would give for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. I have my very own vineyard. You may have the 1,000, O Solomon, and the guards of the fruit 200. O you who linger in the garden, a lover is listening. Let me hear your voice. Hurry, my beloved, swift as a gazelle or a young stag to the hills of spices.
And that's the last words. Now, these last verses from a pretty much here on, people aren't too sure what to make of those, which is why it's usually called an appendix or appendices. It's one of the reasons why some people say it's an anthology. Like, this isn't one person or one couple talking, that this was a collection of poems that people wrote, and then they kind of, put them together. And then there were some verses that really didn't fit, and so they kind of put them at the end. Look, one of the problems with that idea is this refrain: I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, do not wake or rouse love until it please. That seems to be a refrain that, again, maybe is the last line of the poem or the last line of the collection again, which is maybe the last few lines are poems that kind of people felt, oh, well, this is kind of like that. Let's kind of, we don't want these to go anywhere, like little clippings that they put at the end. This line happens to be one of the most famous lines too. So, let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand. That's sometimes said when we present the ring to the couples. They would say, let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand, because it's on your hand, right? It's the heart, but it's also the hand or arm, right?
That's what I said at my wedding instead of Dodie Lee.
Yeah. So some people say this, right? Some people say, because it's the zroa, right? Which is the connection to Passover, right? That's the arm. It's not hand, yod. It's a zroa, which is your whole arm, which is what we call the zroa, right? This is the shank bone that's on your Passover plate. But let me be a seal upon your heart and a seal upon your hand is the way it's usually translated. And it's, again, a very appropriate line to say when people present a ring to each other. They usually don't quote the rest of the line. I laugh because it is really dark in a way, because love is fierce as death. Whoa. It sounds like a line from a rock song or something. Passion is mighty as hell, or the netherworld. I'm going to say hell, but Sheol, right? Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. I mean, okay, that's all true, but it's kind of not where you thought that was going, or at least when you have seen this out of context, not realizing where the whole line goes. But it shows you again this kind of idea that is kind of connected to some extent with some of the lines of Song of Song, which is that love hurts, right? Love, it's tough to get love going, especially, again, as the refrain says, if it's not the right time, right? If it's too early, until you can do do something about it. Don't get it started. And so it seems like that's part of the really part of this text. Now, again, we take the lines out of context and we kind of make it feel like, this is all good, but there is definitely a feeling in this to some extent that, like, yeah, but we can't do anything about it. And so it's tough because we're not together. We say these words back and forth to each other, but are we really able to be with each other? There's passion, but again, then there's this, can we really do anything about it? It's because there is definitely that in this text, like, where is my beloved? Sometimes he's not there. Other times it's like, I would like to be with him, but I can't. He's not, I can't be with him because we're not officially together. But look, it seems as though these people know each other pretty intimately, right? So even if they're not yet married, they don't seem to care from the standpoint of, they definitely seem to be getting it on. So if they're not, they have really vivid imaginations about what's happening, which is possible. It's possible. They've never actually seen each other naked, but they're imagining what they look like naked. That's possible. But it's also possible that these are people that are very excited about each other, and they're not able to be married yet. Not to imply that once they're married, they're not going to feel this way about each other. I didn't say that. She's not even watching. There's no way my wife is watching. But yes, there is a sense that this is very early on in the relationship. Again, maybe early enough that they're not even officially married. But look, however it's interpreted by, again, some people interpret it as an allegory, as a symbolic relationship between ourselves and God, which has ups and downs. But in the Kabbalah, it's very sexual in some of the Kabbalistic imagery. The relationship that we have with God it becomes very sexual in some cases. again, it's written by men who are interestingly seeing themselves as the woman in the relationship with God. But this idea of, marrying themselves or kind of devoting themselves to God with all of their heart, becomes, it becomes symbolic, and it made its way into the Kabbalistic text, the Zohar, and then again, as I said, into Lachad Odi, which I will show you the lines from Shir Hashirim, from Song of Songs, that are in that. So, the one I just showed you is obviously the Lachad Odi, Come My Beloved, from 712. But when we read in the Talmud, the way some of the rabbis would and again, this isn't the Talmud. This isn't even the Zohar. This isn't even in the Middle Ages. This is in the Talmud. This is 2,000 years ago. That already on Shabbat Eve, the rabbis were putting on some kind of special cloak, some special kind of almost like a wedding dress. Perhaps not a wedding dress, but a wedding, the wedding robe that a man would put on, and would go out to the Shabbat and say, "Come bride, come bride." That's speaking to the Shabbat as a woman, right? And that was another way of imagining at least some aspect of the divine, in this case, the divine feminine. And I'll show you some of the other parts of Lachad Odi that are from Song of Songs. Okay, of course, this part, Hitorari, Kumi, is from Isaiah. That's a really famous part of it. But this line here, right from the beginning, Nagila v'nizmecha ba, we will be glad and rejoice in it. We will be glad. That's from Song of Songs. It's also from Psalms. But let's see the other one here. Where was the other one? Well, the other one was 712. But you can see again the way the rabbis would use this kind of imagery. This is the whole Lachad Odi. These are all the verses. Shamor. We do Shamor, Likrat Shabbat, and then we do Boi Kala. But of course, the name of the guy who wrote it is in the poem. Right? He put his name in there. Shlomo Shin Lamed Mem He Halevi. So the guy Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, the guy who wrote this song, put his name in it. It's pretty smart. It was a good way to, make sure people knew you wrote it. Here's the guy. Oh, it says it somewhere. I saw it. Yeah. So he put his name in it. Yeah. So the poems, the placement of poetry within the way we see the Bible. Oh, here it is, Shlomo Alkabetz. It reminds us that, again, when you cut to it and you look at what types of writing are going to be the ones that kind of elevate us and make us feel like we're open to love and to intimacy and to the highest level of, kind of like our spirit and our hearts. The people thought that would come through in poetry or song, right? They almost universally around the world would say that that's how we unlock that. It's not through, it's not through other types of writing or other types of expressions. I guess if you're a scientist or if you're a mathematician or a computer science person, you see it in code or you see it in formulas. But for most people, We see it in song. We see it in poetry. It's when we kind of are able to express ourselves in a way that, at least the point of view of how do we express our innermost feelings? We would say usually it's through poetry and through music. And even then, it's hard to do it in words, right? It's hard to fully express ourselves in, especially the highest emotions we have, like love. It's not possible, right? And even when we try, it's not possible, right? It's hard for us to do it, which is why, we actually say, you know, um, um, as we say, and every time we say a form of the Kaddish, right? We say God's name is glorified, celebrated, lauded, and praised, right? But God is far beyond all song and psalm, beyond all hymns of glory which mortals can offer. And so we say, whenever we say the Kaddish, right? Whenever we say, whether it's part of the mourner's Kaddish, or whether it's part of, the Kaddish Shalem or the Chatzi Kaddish, every part of the Kaddish says, right? We say, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Le'ela means God is above all of our blessings, all of our songs, right? And yet, that's what we try to do. Ironically, we try to do that through our songs, through our prayers. We try to elevate, ourselves through that. And even then, we say we come short. We fall short. But it's our best attempt. It's the best human attempt at trying to pour out our hearts. I don't know. Any comments? We have a professor of literature online still. I don't know, Floyd, do you have any thoughts on, now that we finished Song of Songs, any thoughts on how we try to do this as human beings, trying to put into words what we feel? No. Floyd.
All right. No, I don't have any thoughts. It, it, I'm always, I bring my own experiences in, and then I think about how Shakespeare laughed at this kind of language. If the sonnets of Plutarch in the Roman poetry used almost the same language as Song of Songs. These incredibly unrealistic comparisons, these metaphors that are idealistic and not realistic. Shakespeare in Sonnet 130 laughed at them, and my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, and he tried to bring a more realistic look at love rather than an idealistic look. This is extraordinarily romantic stuff, and I've never read this before. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that all of you are reading this. I'm joking. It's beautiful language, but it's not modern language. It's not realistic language. It's not language that I would ever use to express romantic feelings. But look, we're talking about thousands of years ago, so I don't have a whole lot of things.
So what's interesting though. You raise an interesting point. Is that today, when we express love in music, poetry, obviously to some extent, though poetry is so less part of our our cultural experiences than music is, than song is. I mean, that's the. I finally saw the the Bob Dylan movie last night or the night before. I finally watched it, and they end with the final the final text at the end is that Bob Dylan's the only songwriter that's ever won a Nobel Prize, and he didn't show up for it. Right? They made that point. They didn't go to get his Nobel Prize. But it's interesting again that when we think about the way that people try to convey love in our modern types of writings, right? We usually don't use a lot of imagery, right? We tend to be a lot more straightforward, especially in the last 50, 60 years of rock music. We tend not to use a lot of metaphor, and we tend to kind of be kind of a little bit more straightforward, right? But people did write, people did try to write this way for a long time. And I think it probably was seen as a expression, it was seen to be, because that's the mode that you work in, the better you could do, the more accomplished you were. This was a sign of skill if people could do this, right? If they could write something in this style and it was preserved, then it must have been really, really good. So I think people looked at it in a different way because this was the mode, this was the way they did it. And so if they did it this way, then this is what they valued. It's interesting because today, like I said, it tends to be a lot more straightforward. In some ways it's challenging. In some ways it becomes harder because people are just laying it all out there. There's not really a whole lot of thinking you have to do about it. When you hear a love song, it's pretty straightforward nowadays. But interestingly, Dylan, was kind of, they brought out in that movie was that because he used a lot of imagery and because he used a lot of kind of, symbolism, that, people appreciate it, maybe because again, it's not done a lot, that people don't spend a lot of time kind of creating poetic imagery in their lyrics, and they appreciated that with them. So I think it's interesting that, and again, we saw that in the Leonard Cohen movie that we saw too, that people who try to, and of course he actually uses the Bible, he plays off the Bible, Cohen does, and Dylan does to some extent too. But when people looked at how people create literary art today, I think this really does seem strange. It does seem different. It does seem like this is not, it's not the world that we live in anymore. What I think is interesting about it is that if you look at what they used everything. They used nature, they used spices, they use, all the scents that they use, all the animals that they use, all the flora, fauna, everything that's there that they used. This book, this collection had it all there. And so, we see it a little bit in Psalms. It's a lot more. It's 150 chapters, so there's, you'll see a whole lot more, and it's harder to kind of find it, but because it's so vast. But using these images and using these different elements that were I think it was just I think it was an artistic skill, and so people appreciated that. And again, as I said, at the end of the day, the rabbis remind us that the things that are really important, and like Shakespeare said, it's silly to try to do it because we can't. It's beyond our abilities to express really in words those feelings and those emotions and those connections. But Rosemary, I really appreciate you reading it because it's not an easy text to read. It's not easy to read, and it's not sometimes giggle or be snarky about it, but it really is. To me, it's a beautiful book that again, our ancestors tried to make sense of, like, how do we keep this or what do we do with this? But thankfully, they led us into a little bit of the way that they kind of maybe lived on a more human plane. But again, our ancestors, at least the rabbinic ancestors, couldn't just have that. They had to have something deeper to it. They had to have something that couldn't just be the human expression. So Rabbi Akiva said, this is the Holy of Holies, right? He said that this is really special. He also said, don't sing this like, his words were, you don't sing this like a tavern song. This is not meant to be taken in its more bass and kind of emotional on the baser emotional levels of this is just about sex or about having a good time with a woman or a man. He said it's not. He actually says if you sing this like a tavern song, you're going to hell. That's what he said. So, a little bit more. I'm softening what he said, but he said you need to see this in a serious way. So thank you, Rosemary, for helping us see it. And I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and put this, tat this up on your back, but it is pretty amazing that these words still find significance for people. And every time I say this at a wedding, I kind of think about the fact that we're replaying words of love that are thousands of years old, and that by itself is something to really consider and to be amazed that words that were written thousands of years ago can still resonate in the ways that we celebrate our love at the highest level, which for us even today is still marriage, still a wedding. So thank you everybody for being here
Oh,
today.
I wanted to remember
Yes.
Joe Renson. It's his yard site today.
Oh yeah, thank you.
He'll be
Thank you,
gone for
Dale.
9 years.
April, right here at the beginning of April. That's right.
Yeah. And he loved this book. I'm
We
glad we're
did.
reading his book.
We did talk to him about it. Yeah, I talked to him about it a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good time. It's April Fool's Day. I didn't think anyone was going to pull an April Fool's joke on us. It's also going to be John's birthday in a couple of days. So happy birthday to John. It's a national holiday in his house. He wants
And I have
bottles
two
of
great-
of Jack Daniel's he wants Blue Label.
And I have two great
Johnny
nephews
Walker, I mean.
having
That's what I meant.
Brit Milah in the next 5 days.
Oh my goodness.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
That's excellent news. Thank you, everybody. And be happy. It's springtime. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.